The ocean holds its secrets well. Beneath the surface, entire ships vanish into the depths, their stories forgotten, their wrecks left to rust in silence. Some disasters make headlines, Titanic, Lusitania, and the Andrea Doria, but others remain buried in history, despite the staggering loss of life and the chilling mysteries they leave behind. Here are the 4 horrifying shipwrecks you probably never heard of. Number 1. The Spanish Titanic. The year was 1916. A grand ocean liner, the Príncipe de Asturias, was making its way across the Atlantic. It was Spain's pride, a ship meant to rival the luxury and prestige of the great liners of the world. On board were passengers from all walks of life, wealthy travelers enjoying first-class amenities, working-class immigrants packed below deck, and hidden among them, hundreds of undocumented stowaways hoping for a fresh start in the Americas. But this voyage would never reach its final destination. On the night of March 5th, during the height of Brazil's Carnival festivities, the Príncipe de Asturias found itself caught in a violent storm. Rain poured relentlessly, waves crashed against the hull, and a thick fog blanketed the ocean. With visibility near zero, the ship unknowingly veered off course, heading straight toward disaster. At 4:00 a.m., disaster struck. The liner collided with an underwater rock formation near the Ilha Bela archipelago off the coast of Sao Paulo. The impact tore open the hull, sending seawater rushing in. Within moments, the ship's boilers exploded, engulfing entire sections in flames. The bow plunged downward, dragging the rest of the ship with it. In just 5 minutes, the Príncipe de Asturias was gone. Of the 654 registered passengers and crew, at least 445 were confirmed dead. But that number doesn't account for the hundreds of stowaways trapped below deck. Survivors later claimed the real death toll could be close to 1,000, making it one of the deadliest shipwrecks in Latin American history. But the mystery surrounding the sinking doesn't end there. One survivor, ship electrician Gregorio Silas Peña, spent decades investigating the disaster. He believed the ship's cargo held undocumented gold shipments, possibly meant to establish a Spanish bank in Buenos Aires. He also recalled seeing a small cargo boat approach the Príncipe just before the wreck, transferring unknown crates before vanishing into the storm. And then there's the most chilling part. The ship's captain, Jose Lotina, was never found. No body, no confirmed survival, nothing. Some rumors suggest he committed suicide. Others speculated he was involved in something bigger, perhaps even orchestrating the wreck itself. Today, the wreck of the Príncipe de Asturias remains at the bottom of the South Atlantic, a ghostly time capsule filled with unanswered questions. Did navigational error alone cause the disaster, or was there something more sinister at play? One thing is certain, this was no ordinary shipwreck. Number 2. The Australian hospital ship Centaur. A hospital ship, a red cross on its hull, a vessel built to save lives. Yet in May of 1943, the AHS Centaur met a fate that shocked the world. This was World War II, and the waters off Australia's coast were no stranger to enemy attacks. But even in wartime, there were rules. Hospital ships were protected under international laws. They carried no weapons, no combat troops, only medical personnel and wounded soldiers. They were supposed to be untouchable. The Centaur had started its life as a merchant vessel, but by 1943, it had been converted into a fully operational hospital ship. It was painted white, marked with large red crosses, and brightly illuminated at night. There was no mistaking its purpose. On May 12, 1943, the Centaur set sail from Sydney, heading for Cairns. It carried 332 people, including members of the 212th Australian Field Ambulance Unit, who were being transported north. The crew expected a smooth journey. After all, they were under the protection of wartime laws. They were wrong. At 4:10 a.m. on May 14th, a Japanese submarine lurking in the darkness launched a torpedo. It struck the ship's fuel tank, triggering a massive explosion that tore the vessel apart. Fire spread instantly. The superstructure collapsed. The funnel crashed onto the deck. Oil coated the water's surface, burning everything in its path. Within 3 minutes, the Centaur had vanished beneath the waves. Those who weren't killed in the explosion were left fighting for survival in the water. The lucky few who had made it to lifeboats endured 36 hours adrift, battling hunger, exhaustion, and sharks circling in the distance. Out of the 332 people on board, only 64 survived. Among them was Sister Ellen Savage, one of 12 nurses aboard the ship. She was the only one who survived. Despite suffering multiple broken ribs, a punctured lung, and other serious injuries, she concealed her pain to keep others calm. She led sing-alongs, reassured the wounded, and did everything she could to lift spirits. For her bravery, she was awarded the George Medal, one of Australia's highest honors. But the attack on the Centaur was more than just a military tragedy. It was a war crime. The ship had no weapons, no combat personnel, and was clearly marked as a hospital ship. Its destruction was a deliberate, brutal act. For decades, the location of the wreck remained a mystery. Families of the victims pushed for answers, demanding the ship be found to honor those lost. Then, in 2009, after 67 years, searchers finally discovered the wreck of the Centaur. It lay 2,000 meters below the ocean surface, just off the coast of Queensland. When underwater cameras reached the wreck, they captured an eerie sight. The ship's bright red crosses were still visible, even after all those years in the deep. To this day, the Centaur remains protected as a military grave, a reminder of the brutality of war and the lives lost in an attack that should have never happened. Number 3. The Cataraqui. The Cataraqui was supposed to be a lifeline. It carried hope, literally. Aboard were 366 British immigrants, families desperate to escape poverty, all heading to Australia for a fresh start. Alongside them, a crew of 43 worked tirelessly to ensure their safe passage across treacherous seas. But on August 4, 1845, that dream was shattered. The voyage had been smooth for months, until the ship reached the Roaring Forties, a stretch of the Southern Ocean notorious for its violent, unrelenting storms. For 2 straight weeks, the Cataraqui battled hurricane-force winds and relentless waves, struggling to stay on course. By the time they were within the sight of Australia, exhaustion had set in. Captain Charles Finlay, believing that they were safely approaching Melbourne, turned northeast, expecting to spot Cape Otway. But what he didn't realize was that the fierce winds had pushed the ship further east and south than he had calculated. Instead of deep waters, the Cataraqui was heading straight for the jagged coastline of King Island. At 4:30 a.m., disaster struck. The ship slammed into underwater rocks near Fitzmaurice Bay. The impact was catastrophic. Within seconds, the hull splintered and seawater rushed in, flooding the lower decks. Families, still asleep, were trapped below as the ship tilted violently, waves crashing over the sides. The chaos was unimaginable. Screams filled the air as passengers scrambled toward the upper deck. The ship groaned under the immense pressure of the waves, its wooden frames snapping apart. The lifeboats were instantly torn away by the sea. Captain Finlay and his crew desperately tried to lighten the ship by cutting down the masts, hoping that the waves would push it closer to shore. But it was no use. By mid-morning, the ship was split in half. The stern sank instantly, taking more than 100 people with it. By midnight, only 50 were left clinging to what little remained of the wreck. Hour by hour, fatigue and cold claimed more lives. One by one, survivors lost their grip and were swept away into the darkness. When dawn broke, only 9 people remained. Of the 409 people on board, only 1 passenger survived, a 30-year-old laborer named Solomon Brown. He had boarded the Cataraqui with his wife and 4 daughters. All of them were gone. The 8 other survivors were crew members. For days, they wandered the coastline of King Island, too weak to call for help. It wasn't until sealers patrolling the island found them that they were finally rescued. The wreck of the Cataraqui remains one of Australia's greatest maritime tragedies. Today, a memorial stands on King Island, marking the spot where so many lives were lost. But the ship itself? Still there. The remains of the hull are buried beneath the waves, resting in silence, a tragic reminder of how close they came to safety. Number 4. The Montevideo Maru. In the chaos of World War II, thousands of Australian soldiers and civilians were taken prisoner by the Japanese after the fall of Rabaul in 1942. Many were held in camps, but 1,054 prisoners, including 845 Australian troops and 209 civilians, were secretly loaded onto a Japanese transport ship, the Montevideo Maru, in June of 1942. It was a death sentence before they even left port. The ship wasn't marked as a POW transport. No Red Cross, no warning signs, just a regular merchant vessel traveling unescorted towards the Chinese island of Hainan. That decision cost everyone on board their lives. On July 1, 1942, the Montevideo Maru was spotted off the northern coast of the Philippines by an American submarine, the USS Sturgeon. The Americans had no idea the ship was carrying prisoners of war. They only saw an enemy vessel ripe for attack. At 2:30 a.m., the Sturgeon fired 4 torpedoes. One of them struck the hull, tearing through the lower decks, where hundreds of prisoners were held in cramped, windowless compartments. The impact was instant. Water rushed in, flooding the ship within minutes. After the vessel took on water, desperate prisoners tried to escape, but the doors were locked. Those who made it to the deck were faced with another horror, Japanese guards refusing to let them jump overboard. In the darkness, Australians in the water began singing Auld Lang Syne as the ship slipped beneath the waves, a final farewell to the comrades still trapped inside. In 11 minutes, the Montevideo Maru was gone. Not a single prisoner survived. In 81 years, the exact location of the wreck remained unknown. Families were left with no closure, no grave sites, only the devastating knowledge that their loved ones had been lost at sea. Then, in April of 2023, after decades of searching, a team of deep-sea explorers finally found the wreck. The Montevideo Maru lay at a depth of 4,000 meters in the South China Sea, deeper than the Titanic. For the first time in over 8 decades, the lost soldiers of Rabaul had been found. The site has since been declared a war grave, protected from disturbance. No artifacts will be removed. No remains will be touched. The wreck will remain untouched, silent and sacred, a final resting place for those who never made it home. If you want to hear more about history and shipwrecks, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next deep dive into history's lost secrets. And tell us in the comments which of these shipwrecks shocked you the most. Thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next one.